What's up, everybody? Brewcephas here. Good Saturday morning to you. Today, as you can see, I've got me a cold foamer for breakfast. Cheers, everybody. This is the Not Dale's Pale Ale that I brewed a couple weeks ago. Let's give it a taste. It's a good beer. I'm very pleased with the way that came out. So if you remember, I don't have my notes in front of me. I was going for like a, hold on. Okay, so if you remember when I brewed this, if you didn't, you can go back and watch the brew day if you want. I was going for a 1057. This was the all grain beer, American Pale Ale. Going for 1057, came up with 1046. Okay, so I knew there wouldn't be quite as much alcohol as there was supposed to have in it. It was supposed to come out around 5.9 ABV. This came out around 4.7 ABV. Okay, so what I want to do today is compare it to the Dale's Pale Ale, because this was a clone recipe. If you brew this beer correctly, it should come out tasting like an Oscar Blues Dale's Pale Ale. So let's just see. I'll have a couple beers for breakfast. Another cold foamer. So color wise, way different. So obviously this is mine here on the right. This is Dale's here on the left. Ooh, look at how clear the Dale's is. Wow. So, could I have made mine more clear? Yes. Is it really worth it to me? No, not unless I'm like bottling it and sharing it with other people, or if I know people are coming over and they'll be tapping the keg, then it might matter a little more. Let's talk taste, and then I'll talk clarity a bit more. So, hoppy right up front. You can tell in the color alone just how much darker the Dale's is, that it's got a nice grain profile to it. So the body of this beer, it's grainy quality. It's just a much more balanced beer. Okay, hops, because I use the same hops that they used, as far as I know. The hops hit you up front, but then it finishes off very nicely with a grain sweetness. God dang, that beer's good. Double fisted for breakfast. Okay, so mine is probably not more hoppy, but that initial hop taste that you get out of mine finishes off with a hop taste. Whereas the Dale's finishes off with a nice grain sweetness. And that's where I did all this research back in the day, but I've forgotten so much because of that long break that I took. Cheers, mate. I feel like had I been closer to that 1057, sorry, instead of 1046, would I have had a better grain profile? Someone tell me in the comments. I'm gonna look it up, but I didn't get all of the grain or all of the sugars, starches out of the grains that I could have. I'm gonna have to look up how they how they achieved this, because this is a delicious beer. And here's the thing, if I knew it'd come out like this every time, or pretty close, I'd still brew it when I wanted something hoppy. It's just not too balanced. It's a lot lighter than this one. Okay, when we talk about darker beers or like heavier beers, usually that's like a grain quality. And this is obviously a heavier beer than this. This is almost, it feels in the mouth like a lawnmower drinker, but it's so hoppy. And while I was just pulling this out of the keg, I was like, I made a pretty good beer. And I did make a pretty good beer. But this thing, Oscar Blues knows what they're doing. The Dale's Pale Ale is phenomenal. This is actually one of my favorite beers. So brewing a clone, I knew if I could just get close, it'd be a good beer. But man, shooting for this, that's big shoes to fill. Quite hoppy up front, but the hop flavor dissipates rather quickly. It fades into the grain sweetness that I was talking about. And it's not sweet by any means, but it's not just bitter, right? Or hoppy. You know, I love drinking on this. I also enjoy drinking on this. But side by side, it's kind of hard to like go back to this. Like I love Dale's so much. And again, for most of you, if you came over and I said, I got a pale ale, it's pretty hoppy, you'd drink this and I'm sure you'd like it. But like I said, it's like standing next to your hero and comparing yourself. Also, clarity wise, I could have made this a lot more clear. I just used the Whirlflock tablet at 15 minutes like I always do. Back in the day when I was using the carboys, the reason I'm not using my glass carboys is because I'm not controlling the temperature with my thermowell and the deep freeze like I used to, because my deep freeze is being used for other things. So I just fermented in a bucket. Back in the day when I was using those glass carboys, and I plan to again, I would rack it off the primary fermentation into a secondary fermentation in my other glass carboy, and it'd just gain clarity that way. And I've made the Not Dales before, and I've lagered it. So obviously there's things you can do to make it more clear. And where I screwed up this time, I'll just be upfront, full transparency. My keg's clogged. I took this thing right out of the bucket into the keg, as you would have seen in the kegging video. And I think I got a lot of like hops themselves into the keg. And I can see a couple like little pieces floating around in here. And that doesn't bother me. Had I bottled and done that, it would have been fine. The fact that it's in the keg and those hops in the bottom, because that keg has a drop center. So all those hops are going down into that drop center where it draws from, and it clogged the thing up. So I did what a guy on a message board said to do. Some people said rack it out of the keg, rack it back into the keg. But my problem was, okay, there's already CO2 in it. So it's gonna be foaming. Like if I'm racking it out and it's got all this CO2 in it, it's carbonated. I don't wanna be moving it all out and back in, and it would have been fine, but I really didn't want to do that. So I put my gas hose, instead of on the end post where the gas goes in, I put the gas on the outpost where the beer's supposed to come out, and I shot CO2 down through that pipe that runs through there to clear it out. And it works for about, I don't know, maybe like 5 seconds. You can get a pretty decent pour, but not great. Not great at all. It takes a long time to pour a beer out of that, so I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm really at a loss. Like I said, when it comes to homebrew, you hear all the horror stories, the people who have had to pour beers down the yard drain. You hear about little things like this, and you just hope that you're never gonna have to deal with anything like that. But my fear is that if you do it long enough, it's part of it. And do you really want to sit down and talk to someone else? Oh, you homebrew, I homebrew as well. Do you really want to be like, oh, nothing's ever gone wrong? If you're getting drunk at the bar or out in the garage and you're talking about homebrewing, these stories are fun. In 6 months' time, this will be fun. So what I plan to do, I'm going to get a hop spider. I've never used one. It's the little mesh kind of bucket that sits down in the boil kettle. And instead of just pouring your hops directly in, you pour them into this little mesh thing, and your hops are in complete contact with the beer, but maybe like when you pull it out at the end, all of those hops aren't still in the wort before you pitch your yeast. So that's one thing. Maybe I'll go back to the secondary fermentation on a beer that uses a lot of hops. The Pliny that's coming up and all the hops that are involved in that. I'm probably gonna rack it off the primary and do a secondary fermentation. But then again, I plan to bottle that one. I forgot. I'm gonna bottle it so I can share it, so the keg's not gonna be clogged on that one. So the next time I keg, I'll do a secondary fermentation where I just kind of let everything clear out a little bit more before I then rack it into the keg. I'd like to take it all apart. I'm like really threatening to just call it a wash, because I mean, the little tiny stream that comes out when you try to pour a beer, you don't want to do that. Is it even worth it? I mean, I got Dale's Pale Ale in the fridge now. Like, do I even want to mess with this? Yes, I want to, but like, is it worth what I'm gonna have to go through to salvage it? I don't know. I don't know if you can see all the hops floating around in there. I assure you there are none in here. This looks like the Marzen I made, the Oktoberfest a couple years ago. This is, I know your colors, you can't see what I'm seeing, and I don't have my flashlight out here, but yeah, I do. So this is pretty much, or it's pretty close from where I'm sitting to the color of the Oktoberfest I made. And it's just so clear and so beautiful. And I think that's a lot of the reason we as home brewers, I mean, we want to impress people with the beers we make, but we also want to feel pride when we drink them and be like, I made this. And if it's clear, you feel even better about it. And if you've lagered it, and because I could get it this clear if I lagered it. You can lager ales, it's fine. The thing is, if you're using a lot of hops, the reason a lot of people don't like to lager is because hops need to be fresh. So you don't want to lager for 2 months and now your hops are a little old. You'd rather have that nice hop freshness. So if you're gonna lager something like this, a pale ale, an IPA, probably wouldn't. I mean, I've done it to the Not Dales and it turned out good, but I don't know, for some of your other styles, especially, you know, like your Marzens, that is a lager. And it's nice and grainy and sweet, but not too sweet. And just an amazing beer. I'm ready for Oktoberfest season. My goodness, summertime. There ain't no cure for the summertime blues except. Cheers, everybody. This was fun. I mean, let's go into mindset mode. Let's go into home brewing philosophy mode. When I talk my home brewing philosophy, it's keep it simple. Everything's gonna turn out fine. And it did. All except for the keg faux pas. But it turned out good. This, like, it's a pale ale. Am I happy with it? Yes. Do I wish I could draw it from the keg? Yes. Because I'd drink this. So, the stuff you're brewing, you're gonna want to drink. I mean, for the most part. You might mess up so bad every now and then that it won't be drinkable. But that's pretty rare, really. I mean, as long as you're not fermenting in a 100-degree attic, you know, if your beer's in the coolest part of your house, in a dark closet, you know, you can do the bucket and the ice bath to drop the ambient temp a bit, knock some heat off if your room isn't that cool. If you have a basement, like, if you're reasonable about things, you're not reaching your hand in the wort, your unclean hands in the wort, and I wouldn't put my hand in it even if it was clean. But as long as you're not doing stupid stuff, here's the thing, you can do a lot of stupid stuff like that and have your beer still turn out fine. Which is crazy. Because we're all taught that, like, there's some things you just don't freaking do. Putting an unsanitary object into a beer, you know, after the yeast is pitched, or into a wort after it's 70 degrees. It's not sanitized. You put that in there, you're gonna ruin the whole batch. Well, maybe, but I'm pretty sure one of the Brewcephas guys, like, spit in one time just to see if he could mess it up, and he couldn't. So I don't think you really have to be as careful as a lot of people think. And, you know, there's always that chance that you are gonna mess it up, and you don't want to wait the whole time and have a bad beer. But from where I'm sitting, I've done some sketchy things around some beers. No, I mean, nothing. I've definitely, like, had maybe my hand came into contact with the beer after I pitched the yeast, and it didn't feel right to me at the time. Or maybe I was talking and I felt some spit fly into it or something. Like, stuff like that's definitely happened. And those aren't the beers that came out bad. And I know that because I was very conscious of the fact that I might have gotten a little spit in that one, and it came out fine. After I sweated for a month about it. I wouldn't sweat for a month now because I know for the most part your beers are gonna turn out good. Nothing much to worry about there. But when you're really trying to do a clone and, like, hit a mark, there's a lot of stress in that. And some people could, you know. It's the people who are heavy on research, who really know their chemistry, and, you know, they're adding stuff to their water to get it to the right pH level and all of this stuff. All of that contributes to the mouthfeel, to the way the beer actually comes out. This was not made in a lab. This was. So, all we're doing what I knew is that my recipe was strong. Okay, that was the point of the clone. I knew my recipe was strong. And so I knew I'd come out with a good beer, even if I did screw it up a little bit. Okay, so I still don't know what I'm gonna do about the keg situation. How about this? On 24 ounce Tuesday, so here in 3 days, I'll be right back here with a tall boy, and I'll tell you what I wound up doing. So I'll make a decision by Tuesday. It's nice being here. It's good being back. It's always great being in front of the camera and knowing I'm talking to people who have the same passions or hobbies that I do, and the same interests. And I just want to encourage you. I always want to be encouraging to the extent that you know it's not hard to make good beer. And I really want to be clear about that. And that's why I come back in front of you with these tastings. And it would have been easier just to taste mine in front of you and be like, that was good. What I wanted to show you in the tasting, I really wanted to drink a Dale's Pale Ale. And for my own curiosity, I wanted to see how mine kind of matched up or compared. But I thought it would be fun for you. I thought you might be interested since it is a clone recipe. Like, does it taste like a Dale's? Should it taste like a Dale's? And does it matter if it doesn't taste like a Dale's? And I guess the whole point of my experiment, because I knew going in, the point was to say, this beer that I made was not this beer, but this beer got drank first. They were not the same, and I prefer the Dale's over the one I made. However, this in itself was a great beer. So you don't have to live up to anything. Just shoot for what you like. Make the beer that you like. The more research you do, probably the better off you'll be to a certain point. I started reading the chemistry last year, and that's, I think, kind of where everything went south. But do what you love what you do, and that's why we're here, and I want to keep it that way. Okay, cheers everybody. It's Saturday morning if you're just seeing this. Got a beautiful day ahead of us. I'll be back on Tuesday. We'll pound a tall boy, and we'll talk about what I ended up doing with the beer in that keg. Okay, cheers guys and gals. Have a good one. See you later. Have a good weekend. Peace.